Good morning. My name is Hirani Gunatelaka. In this presentation, I will critically analyze the Colombo Port City project using project management principles. The Colombo Port City project is a major land reclamation development near Colombo Fort led by China Harbour Engineering Company through Port City Colombo in partnership with Sri Lankan government. Its goal is to create an international financial and business hub for South Asia, positioning Colombo alongside regional centers such as Dubai and Singapore. This strategic purpose provides the basis for evaluating the project's final outcomes. The project aimed to attract foreign investment, create jobs, build a dedicated financial center, and support Sri Lanka's long-term economic growth. However, these objectives were broad and aspirational. From a project management perspective, their weaknesses was the lack of clear measurable targets such as specific investment amounts, job numbers, or delivery timelines. This makes it difficult to judge whether the project fully achieved its promised outcomes. The project scope includes land reclamation, commercial and residential areas, leisure and tourism facilities, and supporting infrastructure. This broad scope increases project complexity, expands stakeholder coordination needs, and raises the risk of scope creep. It also makes scope baselining and change control more difficult than in a standard construction project. The project has many stakeholders with competing interests. The Sri Lankan government seeks political and economic gains, while China Harbour Engineering Company, Port City Colombo and investors focus on commercial returns and capital security. Local communities and environmental groups are concerned about social and ecological impacts, while future residents and businesses are the long-term users. The main project challenge is balancing investor expectations with community and environmental concerns. The project was proposed in 2011, construction began in 2014, and it was suspended in 2015 after a change in a government for environmental review. It resumed in 2016 and has continued through phase development. The delay shows how political risk can directly affect project schedules, especially in large public-private infrastructure projects. Such projects must account for the political environment during schedule planning. The Colombo Port City project involved major investment with the initial development valued around $1.4 billion, plus significant costs for reclamation, utilities, roads and infrastructure. Its financial returns are expected over decades through land development, leasing or sales. This makes cost performance difficult to assess using traditional cost variance methods because the project is still in its early operational stage and most returns are long term. Now let's apply the triple constraint framework of scope, time and cost. In terms of scope, the overall vision and master plan have largely been maintained despite the political and environmental challenges faced. In terms of time, the project experienced significant delays primarily due to the 2015 suspension for environmental review and subsequent policy changes under different governments. And in terms of cost, these delays have had knock-on financial impacts, including increased holding costs, renegotiation of terms, and additional expenditure on environmental compliance measures. This illustrates a classic project management lesson. A change in one constraint, in this case time, inevitably has ripple effects on cost even the scope remains fixed. In terms of risk management, the major risk categories for this project include environmental risk related to the impact of land reclamation on marine ecosystems and coastal erosion, political risk arising from changes in government policy, regulatory risk connected to the environmental approvals and land use laws, economic risk tied to currency fluctuation and Sri Lanka's broader economic stability, and reputational risk for both the government and the developer given the international visibility of the project. Critically, while these risks were broadly identifiable in advance, the suspension in 2015 suggests that political and regulatory risks were not adequately planned for or mitigated proactively. A more robust risk management plan might have included earlier and more thorough environmental impact assessments before construction began rather than after. Stakeholder and communication management included public consultations, government developer coordination, investor reassurance, and media communication. However, much of this appears to have been reactive, increasing after the 2015 suspension and public controversy. Earlier and stronger stakeholder engagement may have reduced opposition and helped avoid delays. The project uses a long-term phased development model under a public-private partnership between the Sri Lankan government and the Chinese developer. Governance is managed through a dedicated economic commission for the Port City Special Economic Zone. This structure supports faster approvals and investor facilitation, but also raises concerns about transparency, accountability, and reduced reliance on normal regulatory checks. So, what worked well? The project demonstrated a strong strategic vision, successfully attracting major international investment to Sri Lanka at a scale rarely seen before. It has driven substantial infrastructure development, including new land, roads, and utilities that did not exist previously. And it has helped position Colombo more prominently on a regional map as a potential financial hub. Many observers point to these achievements as evidence that the project has been a success, particularly given the scale of foreign investment secured under challenging economic conditions of Sri Lanka. However, we should challenge the assumption that securing investment and completing reclamation automatically means success. What did not work well? The project faced significant delays and prolonged uncertainty, particularly during the 2015 suspension. It raised genuine environmental concerns regarding coastal ecosystems that, even after review, remain a point of ongoing debate. It became politically controversial, with successive governments taking different positions on the project, creating instability for investors. And there were clear disagreements among stakeholders, particularly between the government, environmental groups, and local communities, that were not fully resolved. The critical question is, for whom has this project has been successful so far? Investors and the government may view it as a strategic win, but local communities and environmental advocates may see a project whose cost, both financial and environmental, have not been fully for. Accounted for. Success in this case depends heavily on those perspectives you take. From this analysis, several key lessons emerge for project managers handling large-scale politically sensitive infrastructure projects. First, early and genuine stakeholder engagement, particularly with communities and environmental groups, is essential before construction begins, not after problems arise. Second, risk management must proactively account for political risk, especially in projects that span multiple government administrations. Third, transparent communication throughout the project life cycle helps build and maintain public trust, reducing the likelihood of suspensions driven by public opposition. And fourth, project governance structures need to remain flexible enough to adapt to changing political and regulatory environments without derailing the overall project timeline. In conclusion, the Colombo Port City project demonstrates a mixed picture of project management practice. It has succeeded in attracting major investment and delivering significant physical infrastructure, but it has also experienced real delays, cost implications, environmental concerns, and stakeholder conflict that should not be overlooked simply because the project continues to move forward. Rather than labeling this project as simply successful or unsuccessful, the more useful conclusion is that it illustrates how, for large public private mega projects, success is multidimensional and depends on the stakeholder perspective being considered. For future project managers, the broader implication is that technical delivery alone is not enough. Managing political risk and stakeholder relationships is just as critical to a project's overall outcome. Thank you.